Okay. Good evening, everyone. How are you all? Tonight's shiur is called The Greatest Spiritual Journey. The sages tell us, Maaseh Avot Siman Lebanim, the actions and deeds of our forefathers are signposts for their children, means to say that being the pioneers, the first forefathers, they are the pioneers of our faith, and their trials and tribulations, their achievements, what they went through and how, and their attitude, and the revelation that God revealed to them is a telltale sign how we should lead our lives. The first mention of Avraham Avinu in the Torah is when he was 75 years old. Until 75 years old, Avraham Avinu was a spiritual giant. Already at a young age, he recognized the Creator on his own, grew up in a pagan society, in a pagan home, and yet he came to the conclusion on his own that there must be a Creator of heaven and earth that is all-powerful, that is the source of all unity. Everything is united and included within the consciousness of God, and that there is no multiple gods. And he is the creator of all things, and all things are dependent upon him. And as he began to live this ideal and preach these teachings, his very life was at stake. And in fact, Nimrod, the wicked king of that time, felt that he was a challenge to the very foundation of the faith and the culture of the people of the time, and he had to get rid of Avraham Avinu. He's an impediment, he's an interference. Got to get rid of him. And indeed, he threw him in a fiery furnace, and God made a miracle and he survived. And there are much that the Midrashim and the sages teach us about Avraham Avinu until the point when he reached 75. Yet none of this is mentioned in the Torah. The first mention is when he's 75 years old. And as I mentioned before, at already 75, he was an accomplished spiritual presence of his time. He was well known, he was famous. Firstly, for believing and teaching monotheism, the belief in one God. And secondly, being willing to sacrifice for that ideal. And thirdly, surviving, having the miracle. He became famous, he was very famous. Yet no mention in the Torah. The first time it's mentioned in the Torah is when he was 75 years old. And there the Torah tells us, Lech lecha, vayomer Hashem el Avraham. God revealed himself to Avraham and he said to him, the first divine communication, direct communication from God. And there God commands him, which is a very telling thing. Because really, what is the essence of revelation? People aspire to revelation, to closeness, to transcendence, to a spiritual experience, feeling spirituality. In Judaism, what is spirituality? A command from God. Notice that the very first revelation of Avraham Avinu is associated with a command, which means that faith, not harnessed to the commandments of God, not associated to the commandments of God, is not a true spiritual experience. It is one born within the self, relegated and remains within the realm of self, which means to say that it is an experience that it could be spiritual, but it is always remains within the realm of self if it is identified with you. When does a spiritual experience transcend self? Because even if you love God, as the sages say, Yesh mishe ohev, there is someone, an entity who loves God. There is someone who respects God. When do you transcend self? When is your experience a truly spiritual experience? When the self is put aside and you do what God wants. When a mitzvah, commandment is associated with it, the will of God, it doesn't matter now whether I understand it or not. By all means, delve and try and understand, but that's not the issue. Doesn't matter whether you like it or not, whether you appreciate it or not. Because the whole concept of a command is not about you. It's about transcending you. It's about you serving the Almighty and doing His will. It happens to be that His will serves our interest. Happens to be that His will is for our purpose, for our benefit. And that is a true relationship with God. As the Kabbalists teach us, the word tzavta, the word mitzvah, is associated with the word tzav. Tzav, to command. Tzav et bnei Israel, go and command the Jewish people. Tzav or tzavta means a unification, to enjoin, to bring together. How can a mortal being truly become one with God when we are mortal? Even though you may have spiritual experiences, spiritual feelings, it is born from the mortal human being, and therefore can never ever transcend self. We can never transcend self. The only time that we can transcend self is when God commands us to do something, we do His will or study His wisdom, His Torah, then we transcend self. And then in fact, we bring the immortal within the realm or the vessels of the mortal. So, it's interesting that the very first revelation, which is a spiritual experience, is one that's associated with a command. All of the spiritual experiences of Abraham Avinu until now are not worthy of a mention in the Bible, in the Torah. They are great spiritual experiences. Enlightenment, knowing and coming to the realization that there's only one God, that's a great spiritual experience. Being so strong to be willing to give up your life for your ideals, for your values. It's an immense spiritual experience. To overcome a challenge, to overcome a trial. We all know whenever we overcome something challenging in our lives, we feel empowered. We feel noble. We feel worthy before God. We feel in control. When we don't, we feel enslaved, we feel belittled. We don't feel that we are self. We are beneath self. We are beneath our potential. I'm fond of the story. I've said it before, but I'll say it again. There was a great rabbi by the name of Rabbi David of Lelev, and he would frequently fast from week to week. He would only eat on Shabbat. It's called from Friday to Friday. And one time, as he was journeying along his way, a very great thirst overcame him. And he was passing by a river, and his thirst was so intense that he felt that his life is literally dependent upon it. But he took upon himself, for self-refinement and purification, to fast. And he didn't want to break that fast. He felt that this was a challenge, this was a test that he had to overcome no matter what. But yet the thirst was so intense, and as time went on, the thirst became so great that he just felt that he just cannot go on anymore. But he strengthened himself. What's the expression? He girded his loins. And he overcame the test. And he felt so empowered. And he felt so in control to be able to overcome such a test, to prove to himself his self-worth and value, and the ability to overcome and have the strength to overcome our natural inclinations, our natural tendencies and drives. But yet all of a sudden, he stopped, he turned around, he went to the river and he took a drink and he broke his fast. After all that, he went through such torment, such suffering and pain to overcome it, and he overcame it. He was able to overcome his thirst. Yet he turned around and he went and he drank the drink. Why did he do such a thing? Because he felt that the test of arrogance is a greater test. And because he felt so empowered, he was concerned lest he lose his humility and thus lose self-control and mastery. After all, what did he fast for if not to refine himself? And why did he overcome that trial and test if not to express self-mastery? But when he realized that there was a danger of being proud, of waxing perhaps on his level somewhat lack of the highest level of humility that he would expect from himself, he went and he broke his fast in order not to feel that sense of pride and worthiness, etc. You have to be on such a level to appreciate what goes on in their heads. But we know that when you pass a test, there's a certain sense of empowerment. And all of that, all of these spiritual experiences, it's almost like the Torah ignores. Which spiritual experience is significant? This one right over here. And he's 75 years old at the time, accomplished spiritual man. This one is the one worthwhile of being mentioned. That's what's going on over here. The first revelation is associated with a command from God. For if we truly want to have a spiritual experience, must be associated and harnessed to the will of God, not my will, but the will of God. However noble and spiritual and holy my will may be. And this is part and parcel of the command, as we will soon see. So what is God commanding him? He tells him, Lech lecha, go for yourself, or go, you shall surely go. It's a very hard thing to translate into English. It's a double expression. Lech lecha. We will soon see what that means. Me'artzecha, from your land. Umi moladetecha, from the place of your birth. Umi bet avicha, and from the house of your father. El haaretz asher areka, to the land where I will show you. What is this command all about? What does God want from him? If God wants him to leave his place, his country, it's enough to say, listen, Abraham, I want you to go to the country where I will show you. Yet God doesn't even tell him the country doesn't tell him where you're going. So in other words, he doesn't even reveal to him the destination. So right now, the destination is not so much the key right now. The place where I will show you. That's a significant revelation here. The place where I will show you. And if it is to leave the land, that's important. Leave. This is not for you. It's a corrupt land. Leave. Then why didn't he just say, Tzeh? Leave. Like God told Noah. Tzeh min hateva. Leave the ark. Because the subject matter was leaving the ark. You have to leave the ark now. You've been in the ark. You've been protected in the ark. Now there's no need to be in the ark. The flood has stopped. Tzeh min hateva. Now leave the tova. The teva. Leave the ark. The subject matter is leaving the ark. Whereas here, if the subject matter is to leave this land, then it should have said Tzeh. Why lech? Go forth. Go forth. A different command. A different language style. And lecha, double expression, lech, lecha, go for you. So Rashi immediately says, lech lecha lehanatcha uletovatcha, for your benefit, for your own pleasure. There I will make you into a great nation. You will merit to have children. Your goodness will be known and famous in the world. Your name will become great. You'll be a blessing, etc., etc. Now I ask you, when God says to Abraham, Lech lecha, go forth, lecha, lecha means to you in Hebrew, for you, for yourself, for your benefit. What are we talking about here? We're talking about a spiritual giant. You think for one moment Abraham Avinu is interested in himself? You think for one moment Abraham Avinu is interested in his own benefit? He's gone beyond that. He was willing to sacrifice the most dear thing to us, and that is our own very lives. He was willing to sacrifice. Yet the command comes and tells Abraham, Lech lecha, go for yourself, for your own benefit. What type of benefit are we talking about? Of a person who is not interested in material wealth, acquisition, power, glory, honor, and any of these things, because he's already proven that. Must be we're talking about a totally different level. And must be that the journey itself is a point and purpose. For example, we know that God revealed himself to Moshe Rabbeinu, and he told Moshe, go to the Jewish people and tell them that I'm going to redeem them. I'm going to bring them on this mountain where they will serve God, and I will bring them into the land flowing with milk and honey, the land of Israel, the land that I promised their ancestors. Correct? We know the date that the Torah records the date that God took us out of Egypt. We know the date that God gave us the Torah, so 2 out of 3 so far we know the date. The date of going out of Egypt is the 15th of Nisan. The date of giving of the Torah is the 6th of Sivan. But we don't know the date that the Jewish people entered the land of Israel, the 3rd promise. And the promise is to enter the land of Israel. No date. Why not? It's a significant historical occurrence by which God said, I'm going to take you out of the land of Egypt, 15th of Nisan. I'm going to bring you to this mountain where you're going to get the Torah, 6th of Sivan. The Torah doesn't record 6th of Sivan. The Torah just says on the 50th day. But nonetheless, there is a day, there is a time frame. And the sages calculate when that date is in the 6th of Sivan. But no date is given when they enter the land of Israel. It's almost like insignificant. The truth is, because the land of Israel is an ideal and a goal, it's a constant ideal and a goal. The land of Israel is not only just a place, but it is a spiritual concept and idea by which we continually traveling towards. And the journey itself is significant and a goal unto itself. The journey itself is significant. The fact that we journey through the desert and we achieve whatever it is that we achieve, that we needed to achieve, is significant. It's a significant occurrence. So it's not just that you need to come into this land. The journey itself is significant. That's exactly the same thing with Abraham Avinu. The journey itself is significant. The journey itself is part and parcel of what Abraham Avinu needs to achieve. And there are 2 things. The journey, the actual leaving the house of his birth, his land, the house of his birth, and the house of his father. And that's why it says lech and not seh, go out, because it's not just about going out. It's the journey itself is significant. The journey itself is an achievement. The journey itself is a goal. So let's analyze this a little bit better. In the first instance, the order is a bit odd. It says, go from your land, from the place of your birth, from the house of your father. When a person leaves, where does he go? He first leaves his house, and then you leave your suburb, and you leave your city, and then you leave your country. Here it says, leave your country, leave the place of your birth, and leave the house of your father. The order is not correct. And herein lies a very important lesson to us. And as I mentioned before, signposts for us to learn how to conduct our greatest journey, spiritual journey in our lives. Because we all go through journeys. Every single one of us, every part of our lives is a journey, is a step towards our goal, and the journey itself is part of the goal. So Maimonides teaches us a very important thing. And he says that a person is influenced, has very powerful influences in his life. And that is the influence of his country. The customs, the practice, the philosophical ideas, the pressure, the influence. What God is telling Abraham Avinu, in order to go to the land where I will show you, in other words, in order to be able to achieve spiritual communion with God, you first have to leave these things behind. What do you have to leave these things behind? All of the negative influences that perhaps attach themselves to you or attach themselves to you. And they go in order, from the lower influence to the greater influence. The lower influence is the country, the environment. The other one is mimoladatecha, from what you've suckled, from the place of your birth, what you've suckled, what you've nurtured, what you've absorbed closer to home. And the greatest influence, mibet avicha, from the house of your father, your parents. Because the greatest influence upon any psychiatrist will tell you. The greatest influence, good or bad, doesn't come from your friends, doesn't come from your siblings, although all of them are great influences. Doesn't come from your society, although again, all great, as Maimonides explains. The greatest and deepest imprint upon a human being is his parents. The feeling of inadequacy. Am I fulfilled? Am I a source of pride to my parents? Am I letting them down? Negative influence of parents, of children, putting them down, or all of these things has a great emotional effect. And so too, when parents influence a child for good, the morals, the teachings, stays with the children. The influences, as I mentioned on Shabbat, here you have Lot, who grew up in the house of Abraham, but he wasn't very spiritual. He didn't care about spirituality. He cared about physical acquisitions and wealth. To such a degree that when he became wealthy, he wanted to leave the house of Abraham and he went to Sodom, a very corrupt place, in order to increase his wealth. He saw a very fertile land. I want to go there. You knew that the neighbors were wicked. You knew that the influences were great. Didn't care. Worried more about his wealth. Yet when guests came, and it was illegal to take in guests, he did. And then when they were at risk, he said, please don't harm them. He risked himself. How is that possible? Because he suckled this. He absorbed this in the house of Abraham. And because he absorbed this in the house of Abraham, it affected him. Whether he liked it or not, it affected him. So too, what our children see in our home is of immense, powerful influence. And that's why the order, the last one, the order is the house of your father. In other words, there's the least influence going to the greatest influence. In other words, what God is telling him is, you seek a new identity. You are forging a new identity, that of being a forefather to the Jewish nation. You see, a pioneer. It's a novel, a new thing. Novel, new. You have to leave everything behind you. Everything behind you. All your ideas, all of your influence, even though he himself has reached great spiritual heights. From a Kabbalistic point of view, it is on a deeper level. And that is as follows. A person is born with certain characteristic traits. Now, in regards to Avraham Avinu, he polished his negative characteristic traits. Because we see that he was willing to give up his life. When God commanded him to go forth, and he promised him all of the promises, it says, and Abraham Avinu went as God commanded him, which means he didn't go because of the promises of wealth. He didn't even go in the promise of children, which is a great thing. Who doesn't want children? He went simply because Ka'asher diber elav Hashem, as God commanded him. No other reason. So we see that he had no self-interest. So he polished his negative qualities. So what does he have then left? He has his positive qualities that he was born with, and we all have positive qualities. Some, for example, are very generous. Naturally, people are, you're not doing anything extraordinary when you are generous, when you are born generous. When you are a merciful person, for example, you're not doing anything extraordinary. You're just simply carrying out your own nature. It's a good thing. Lovely, but it's something that you were born with. It's like someone compliments me on, a very nice suit you're wearing. I always say, that's very nice, but the compliment's not for me. The compliment's for the tailor. He made it. I didn't make it. What did I do? I just went and chose it and bought it. In fact, I only bought it because it was on sale. So it's not even a compliment, really. What compliment is it? Someone who's born beautiful. What compliment is it? It's the Creator. The created you beautiful. A beautiful tree. Complimenting the Creator. It's not a compliment for you. A compliment for you is something that you achieve on your own steam. That's a compliment. When you achieve it, when you broke your nature to achieve it, that's a compliment. So if someone naturally, for example, is merciful or is generous and he gives everyone $100, for example, charity. Now, compared to another person, maybe that other person doesn't like to give or is miserly, whatever, that's great. But really, you're not comparing to another person. We don't compare anybody to anybody. We compare them to you. Like the holy Rabbeinu Zusha Manipoli, the brother of Rabbi Elimelech Mlezhensk, would say, I'm afraid of one thing when I get upstairs. I'm not afraid that they're going to ask me, Zusha, why weren't you like King David? I'm not afraid and concerned they're going to ask me, why weren't you like Moses? I'm afraid of one question and one question only. They're going to ask me, Zusha, why weren't you Zusha? Why weren't you the best Zusha that you could be? Which means that there's no trick, there's no accomplishment by expressing your nature. That's who you are. That's a gift from God. You didn't do anything. When you achieve something, when you break your nature, go beyond your nature. If your nature, for example, is to give $100 and you give $200 and it hurts, that's an achievement. You've gone beyond your nature. So God says if you want to be spiritual to Abraham Avinu, you have to leave your nature. What you're born with, your natural talents. Go beyond that. That's why the Talmud says, Eno domeh, shoneh pirkom 100 pe'amim, lo shoneh pirkom 101 pe'amim. One cannot compare someone who studies 100 times to 101 times. And the Gemara says, what kind of business is what? Just one more time, one extra time. That makes it or breaks it. In those days, they used to review things 100 times. We don't have patience. We barely read emails today. You read the top line and the bottom line, and then you quickly shoot a question. Why didn't you send me this? Why didn't you do this? Why didn't you answer my question? And the guy sends back and he says, I did. On road number 3, on line number 3. Just didn't bother to read. We just don't have patience. In those days, they had a bit more patience than we do. And they didn't have mobile phones, internet, and WhatsApps and all of these things. So they used to review, and that's why they knew Torah well. They used to review their studies 100 times. 100 times was the norm. Someone who comes along and goes beyond the norm 101 times, that's significant. Because you went beyond the norm. You went beyond the natural. You went beyond your comfort zone. That's significant. That's spiritual already. If you do something that is born from your nature, again, that's born from you. That's you. That's not a spiritual experience. Someone who gives charity because he naturally is merciful, or he naturally is kind, or he or she is naturally generous, that's not a spiritual experience. When is it a spiritual experience? When you go beyond yourself, when you do it because God commands, and you go beyond your comfort zone. That's a spiritual experience. And that's why the first revelation of Abraham Avinu, the first spiritual experience is harnessed to a mitzvah, to a commandment. And that commandment says, God, leave everything that you are accustomed to. And then he goes further. Me'artzecha. Me'artzecha means from your eretz. The word eretz shares the root ratzon. Eretz asher ratzeta la'asot ratzon aviha. The land that ran. Ratz also means ratzon. You run towards something that you desire, that you want. For a will. It all shares the same root. To run, the land, and to desire shares the same root. So Artzecha, your land, your own land means your own will. Even if your will is a spiritual will. You desire, you seek spirituality. Leave that. Leave that behind. Total fresh slate. Where shall you travel? Where shall you go? The land where I will show you. Meaning to say, the will, the divine will, travel and always traverse, go forth to find the divine will in everything. What is the divine will? Not my will. Even if your will is grand, even if your will is spiritual. And then it says, Umibet avicha, from the house of your father. In Kabbalistic terminology, Av is a symbol for Abba Ilah. Abba Ilah, or the supernal father, is wisdom. Mother, the supernal mother, in spiritual terms we're talking about. Just like we have physical mother and father, that when they unite give birth to children, which is the emotions, which is the expression of wisdom and understanding. When wisdom and understanding come together, they give birth to emotions and speech. That's called son and daughter. So too the supernal mother and father, means to say spiritual levels that give birth to other spiritual levels. And that's called the supernal father and the supernal mother. Abba Ilah, Ima Ilah. Av refers to supernal wisdom. So Av refers to wisdom, as it translates to us in this world, our wisdom. So God is telling Abraham Avinu, if you want a spiritual experience, it cannot be associated with a sense of self. You have to be able to leave even how you understand things. How many people always tell me, Rabbi, when I understand it, I'll do it. But if you understand it, and that's the whole reason why you do it, then you've defeated the whole purpose of what a commandment is. A commandment is to transcend, to touch the divine. The divine is unlimited, it's not limited to your understanding. And therefore, if you do something because you understand it, you're not serving God. Who are you serving? Yourself, your own understanding. What makes sense to you? It's good for me. I understand that. That's good. I like that. Makes sense. I feel fulfilled. It feels meaningful to me. So I will do it. Nice. It's good. It's good. But that's not spirituality. That's not the spiritual experience. You cannot be a forefather with that attitude. God tells him, leave all of that. For those who've been in Mashurim before, you will recall that we've discussed the 10 emanations. Remember? Now, in the world of tikkun, in the world of rectification, where true harmony must exist, then all the 10 must incorporate the other 10. If not, there is a clash, and there's no coexistence, and there's no harmony, and there's no unity, and therefore there's no unity. If a husband and wife are arguing, and there's no unity between them, is there a chance for there to be children? No. There has to be unity. In spiritual terms, there has to be harmony in order for the divine flow to go to the next level and create other revelations, etc., etc. Like the unity of male and female creates children physically, so too in the spiritual realms, unity and harmony creates then, facilitates the divine sustenance and energy to go down to lower levels and lower levels and lower levels until there is created this physical world. If there is no true harmony between spiritual levels and concepts or the emanations, the Sefirot, the 10 Sefirot, then there cannot be an extension of godliness. There's a blockage, it stops there. It stops in, if you recall, we spoke about the shattering the vessels and the world of Tohu, the world of the confounded world, etc., which was, nothing came of it, so to speak. No extension of spirituality, just a shattering, and that was the source of impurity and ego in the world. So for there to be anything an extension, there has to be harmony and unity. So we know that there are 10 emanations, and each emanation must incorporate the other 10. So effectively we have 10 times. There's to be a full unity. 10 times 10, that Arizal tells us that each one of them contains the other 10. Each one has a full partzuf, he calls it. A full partzuf means a full face, which means he has all the other 10 emanations. 10 times 10 equals 100. Which means that what God is teaching Abraham Avinu is you have to reach the highest level of spiritual perfection, which is born through harmony of the spiritual emanations, not through our own experiences, not through my own desires, not through my own understanding, but rather to climb higher, the higher worlds, higher level of consciousness or perception. And that is symbolized by the number 10. If you count the number Lech Lecha, Lech is Lamed and Chaf, correct? The way you spell Lech is Lamed and Chaf. The numerical value of Lamed is 30. The numerical value of Chaf is 20, which equals together 50. Lecha, also exactly the same letters, Lamed Chaf. 50. 50 plus 50 equals 100. 100 refers to the emanations as they are in a complete form. So what God is telling Abraham Avinu is, I want you to traverse and travel towards spiritual perfection. That in itself is a goal. It's not just leaving, not just tzeh, lech lecha. And lech lecha is referring to spiritual perfection. It's interesting to note that God promised Abraham Avinu children and to be great and that there should be continuation, correct? How old was he when Yitzhak was born? He was promised 75 when he was 75. Did it happen when he was 80? No. Did it happen when he was 85? No. It happened when he was 90? No. Happened when he was 95? No. Happened when he was 100. Lech lecha. When did the blessing come to fulfillment? When we are complete in spiritual realms, then we are complete in physical realm as well. We have achieved our objective in the physical realm as well. But I want to go take this a little bit further as well. So when it says lech lecha, go for yourself, le'anatcha letovatcha, for your benefit, for your pleasure, it can't mean physical benefit and pleasure. What was wrong with the way Avraham Avinu was? He was wealthy, he was well known, he was famous, he was honored. No, that's not what it means to your benefit. To your benefit, for a spiritual giant like Avraham Avinu, is the journey that brings you close to God. And the way you come close to God is by perfecting yourself. By leaving not only the naturally born tendencies, for sure the negative ones, but even the positive ones. Because they are born from you. They come from self. They don't transcend. They're not spiritual. They're yours. They're good. They're very good. They're noble. But if you're kind because you're born kind, that's no compliment. The achievement is when you go beyond that. And that's why the Talmud says that those who study 101 times, far, far surpass. They are called he who serves God. Because a guy who serves 100, just 100, he's achieved that level already. He hasn't gone beyond what he's used to. He was a servant of God. He's not the servant of God in a present and future tense, meaning to say that he achieved that, and that's it. It's stationary. And the sages give an example. For example, let's say in those days they used to use donkeys to schlep things. So if you go 1 kilometer, it's $10 a kilometer. $10 for 1 kilometer to take a load. If you go for 1.5 kilometers, that's $50. Oh, I'm only going an extra half, so charge me 5, charge me 15. No. The normal that the donkey carries is for 1 kilometer. You want me to exert my donkey for an extra half a kilometer more than what he's used to? For me to exert him, he can't work the rest of the day. That's an exertion way beyond these normal. For that, I charge 5 times the price. So too in our service of God. To be called a service of God cannot be born from the sense of self or ego or what I'm used to or what I was born with or my natural talents or even my understanding or my divine will, my spiritual will. It has to be completely saturated with spirituality and focused towards the land where I will show you. God doesn't even tell him the land yet because it's not significant. Oh, I like that land. Oh, nice land. It's not significant. The land where I will show you, that's what's important. Where I will show you, that's where you will go. That's what's important. I like the land. I don't like the land. Yeah, that's a good place. I'm happy to go there. That's not the issue. It may be worthwhile to mention that God, the first thing that God tells him in the order, as we mentioned, go from your land. Eretz also is a symbol of artziut. Artziut means materialism. The first step to spirituality, the first step in the ladder of spirituality is to leave your materialism behind. I have mentioned and I've quoted before Nachmanides. that Nachmanides says that spirituality and physicality are mutually, diametrically opposed one to the other. The more material you are, the less spiritual you're prone to be. The more spiritual you are, the more spiritually prone you are, the less physically attached you are. And that's a fact. The more we desire, the more we attach ourselves to materialism, the less spiritual we can be. There was one time in those days, they used to eat white bread, black bread in those days. Poor people ate black bread, and wealthy people in those days ate white bread. Today it's the other way around. You go to Coles, Woolworths, white bread is $1. You want black bread? You want the one with the seeds? You want, what do they call the brand, black bread? Today I forgot what they call it.
Rye.
The rye, and what's the other one? Multigrain. What's the black bread you brought me down here?
The sourdough.
Sourdough, the black sourdough. That's $7.50. Ribono shel olam, 7 times what the white bread cost. Today the rich people eat the bread. That's the way it is. Things are always topsy-turvy. The rich people eat the black bread, and the poor people eat the white bread. In those days, it was the other way around. White bread just came out. You had to bleach. There's a whole process in those days. So one time, a disciple came to his Rebbe, came to his master, and he says, Rebbe, I'm having difficulty feeling spirituality, feeling spiritual. When I put on tefillin, when I pray, I'm having difficulty feeling spirituality. He says, what do you expect? What do you expect for someone who only allows himself the leisure of eating white bread? Someone who only wants to eat white bread? In those days, white bread was like you had to be very finicky, like you had to be a real mefunak. How do you say mefunak in Hebrew?
Spoiled.
In English, very spoiled. You're spoiled rotten. You're a brat. You're a spoiled brat, and you want to feel spirituality. You can't eat black bread. You can only eat white bread, and you want to feel spiritual. How are you so attached to the material world? And with that, I want to say an interesting story that is engraved on my mind and my heart. When the Rebbe was young, he was very young, maybe 6, 7. He was an introvert. He says about himself, he was an introvert. He was very studious. He was an absolute genius in his knowledge. When he was bar mitzvah, his father called him, already stated that he was a genius par excellence. When he was a young child, his father was a known Kabbalist. His books are very, very deep in Kabbalistic teachings. One time a visitor came and discussed Kabbalah, the hidden mysteries of the Torah, with his father, who was the rabbi of the town, and his little son, the Rebbe, was just standing there, was very young. And he looked at him in a joke and he said, he understands, like he understands, a little kid. And the Rebbe's father looked at him and he said, with him you can never know. So he was an introvert, he's very studious, he wasn't into the sports and the climbing and the running and all of that stuff. One day he was walking home, and a tradesman left a ladder on a house, a 2-story, 3-story house. And all the kids were climbing the ladder. It was a novelty in those days, climbing ladder. Today you've got the game, the console, climbing the ladders and all of that games. Who needs to go outdoors? God forbid you go get a sunburn, God forbid, and get some fresh air, God forbid. Maybe you catch a cold. No, you stay home, you play the climbing game on the thing, on the console, on the game thing. God forbid. But in those days, in my day, we played till the sun went down. And we hoped that our parents forgot that we didn't do our homework. So the Rebbe was walking home, and there was a ladder there, and all the kids were playing, climbing up and down the ladder. And one kid went to the 5th step. Oh, for a young kid, 5th step, that's high. The other one was brave, went to the 7th, the other one, the 8th. But everybody went down, nobody climbed up the top of the ladder. And as the Rebbe was walking by, he was very young, they challenged him, go up the steps. And his mother was waiting for him, and she was looking out the window and waiting for him, and she sees what's going on. And so he climbs up, and he starts to climb up. 1, 2, 3, 4. Oh, he beat one of the strong ones. And they beat the other one, the 7th, the 8th, the 10th, until he reached the top. came down and people couldn't believe it. When he came home, his mother asked him, how did you do it? All the strong boys, all the bullies, all the good ones, all the boys who know how to play, the tough ones, they couldn't get past 8th. How did you get all the way up to the top? Here lies a very important lesson that I learned from this story. And he says, when everybody was going up, they were looking down. How far away are from their ground? How far away from their comfort zone? And each one had a different comfort zone. This one, 5, that's too high for me, I was afraid. Went down. This one, 7, this one, 8. I never looked down. I looked at my goal. And that's how I was able to achieve it. In life, if we want to climb the spiritual ladder, but we're always looking, what have I given up? How much have I given up? Oh, I've given up. I'm just starting to keep kasher, for example. I'm giving up on this, I'm giving up on that. No, I can't give up on this. There's no way that I can give up on this. If that's your attitude, then you will not succeed. If you're always looking down and seeing how far away you are from your comfort zone, you'll always come down. Or you'll stay stuck there and you won't go further up. But if you're looking at your goal and you're not looking at your comfort zone, then you're able to reach spirituality. I want to make another very interesting point here, and maybe with this we'll conclude. Lech lecha me'artzecha me'molatcha betavicha. Why does God mention all of these things? Leave here and go the land where I will show you. Why does God make mention all of these things? Where you're born, your country, your house of your parents, and all of that stuff. What's the biggest impediment that we use or we have? And it's real. In our service of God. In doing what we need to do, what we want to do, what we want to achieve. What's the biggest impediment? What's the excuse, the justification? If I was born 100 years ago, if I lived in Iraq or in Morocco with everyone else, all the Hachamim, everybody kept Shabbat, of course I'd keep Shabbat. But here, how can I keep Shabbat? I'll lose my job. Kasher in Israel, it's easy to keep kasher. If I lived in Israel, I'd only eat kasher. But here, I can't get the cheese, the green cheese, the good cheese. What do you call that good cheese? The good cheese, the French cheese, the Belgian cheese. I can't get it here. In Israel, I just can't. I can't. What do you want from me? I was born, my parents don't know anything. I was born in Newcastle. I didn't know anything about Judaism. What do you want from me? But now you know. There's so many books you can read. My circumstances, my environment, the country where I live. All of these are excuses, isn't it? God says, Lech lecha. The journeys that you travel in life, that you go through, all of those challenges, exactly where you were born, to who you were born, place you were born, are all to your benefit, are all for you to achieve, and despite it, you can still achieve. And it is tailor-made for you, and everything that you need to achieve in your life, and we know that everybody has divine sparks that they must elevate. Bring godliness to your world. Everyone has his own world. You have your world and I have my world. You have your divine sparks that you interact and associate with and must elevate, and I have mine. You don't have mine and I don't have yours. I can't do yours and you can't do mine. And where I was born and to who I was born and the time and the date and the country and all of the details, alecha, are to your advantage, a part and parcel of your journey that you need to elevate what you need to elevate and bring godliness to your world. That is your world. So God says to Abraham, that is your world. And don't use that as an excuse. Leave all of that behind, because that's not an excuse. Because I gave you all of these things, and I gave you the power and the strength and the potential and the ability to overcome it. I'm the one that gave it to you. And therefore I command you to leave all of those behind. They are not an excuse. They are not a justification. However, on a deeper level, and we ran out of time, but I wanted to develop this a little bit, but we don't have the time, so I'll throw it in. Maybe another time we can elaborate on it further. We know, and I discussed this a little bit last week, we know that there are 5 parts of the soul: nefesh, ruach, neshama, haya, and yahidah. 3 parts of the soul are enclosed within the body. One of them is very intimately associated with the body, animates the body. One of it is intimately associated with our emotions. And one of it is intimately associated with our intellect. Nefesh is connected to the body. Ki hadam hua nefesh, for the blood is the life source. And that's why it interacts with the body, gives it life. Ruach is the emotions, the more spiritual part of us. That ruach means spirit. More spiritual part of us is our emotions. Neshama, which is breath, refers to our intellect, the most highest part. And then there are parts that transcend us, parts that are too high to be enclosed in the body. One part, and then one part is always unified with God. And for this reason, we find that we can be in the midst of impurity, in the midst of mire and grime and dirt and sin. In the midst of all of this, unexpectedly, we can have a feeling of wanting to return and attach ourselves to God. How? Where does it come from? I've totally exiled my nefesh, ruach, and neshama, my three parts which is even in the body. I've so concealed them that I don't hear their voice anymore. And all of a sudden I feel a desire to come to God, to cleave to God. Where does that come from? That comes from my most inner part, my most inner calling that never gets detached from God, never gets adulterated, never gets stained. And this is what God is telling Abraham Avinu. Lech, you want to travel spiritually, you want to go to the land where I will show you, you want to climb the spiritual ladder. Lecha, to your most inner part, your most inner core. That is the most purest part of you. Nothing can stain it. That is the most powerful spiritual engine. From there you will derive your strength. From there you will derive your power to overcome any difficulty, any challenge. And then you will come to the land where I will show you the land, the will. Remember we said land, Eretz, is associated with the word Ratzon, will. The land where I will show you. In order to come to the land where I will show you, in order to come to a level of cleaving of God, we have to reveal the inner part of our soul. That part of our soul that is always connected to God. That part which is much higher than the body, is never affected by anything that the body does. Any sin, anything never affects it whatsoever. If we are able to access that, if we are able to connect to that, and when that voice rings out, grab onto it. Don't let it go. If you have a feeling, an unexpected feeling of wanting to cleave to God, catch it. Grab onto it, latch onto it, because that's not coming from your part of your soul that is in your body, because right now you've exiled those three parts because you're not behaving in the way that you can. You are very attached to the material world, so you are not able to feel the spiritual dimensions. But if all of a sudden you do, that's coming from your inner part. Your inner part, latch onto it. That is a message from God. That is a message from your most highest part. And if you can lecha, go to yourself, to your most inner self, that is the highest journey that we can ever travel. That is the most greatest spiritual journey that we can ever achieve. And this is how Hashem was directing him, step by step, detaching ourselves from materialism, and then detaching ourselves even from our good nature, from the good qualities that we were given, and even detaching ourselves from the intellectual ideas and ideals and the thoughts that we have formulated about spirituality. Go even beyond all of that. And then we'll be able to achieve the land where I will show you. Okay, we've run out of time. Are there any questions?